Good morning, everybody. I hope you all hear me right now. Perfect. Hope you're ready for this inspirational breakfast seminar. You just heard some music from a project done by the organization Multicultural and some pictures from the organization Art Lords, and we will talk more about them soon. My name is Matilda Andrén. I work at the Swedish Development Forum, but are more known as FUF, or Föreningen för utvecklingsfrågor. We are a membership-based organization that works with spreading knowledge about the global sustainable development for a more just and fair world. I'm not doing this alone. I'm here today together with LSU, that is an umbrella organization for 87 Swedish youth organizations, and LPI, Life and Peace Institute, that is an international peace building organization that works in partnership with civil society in non-violent conflict transformation. But before we start and hand over to our moderator, I will go through some instructions about Zoom, because I don't think that everybody has used Zoom before. It's very important that you know that this will be recorded. We will put this up on fuf.se and on YouTube, but I think that both LPI and LSU are going to share this on their social media as well. So if you don't want to be recorded, please turn off your camera. It's also important that you are on mute the whole session. And if you have some questions, you can write them in the chat instead. To follow the conversation the best, you should also have speakers view on. You change this in the top right corner if you're on a computer. You should not have gallery view on, because then you're going to see a lot of black squares and it won't be so good. I think that is it. If you have any questions regarding Zoom, or if you have any technical problems, you can just email me. I will send my email in the chat, and you have it in the invitation as well. Now we'll hand over to our moderator, Emily Veski, who is Vice President of LSU, the Sweden's youth organizations, and I hope you really enjoy the talk.
Thank you so much, Matilda. I'm just going to double check, Matilda, you hear me? Can you nod back? Is the sound okay? Thank you very much. Then I'm hoping the rest of you can hear me too. Hope you grab your coffee and that you take in a comfortable seat and checked all your fire exits at home. This will be the first digital conversation that I am hosting, and maybe some of you are also joining us for the first time. But really looking forward to listening to our speakers. You already heard a little bit about the hosts and the organizations behind this conversation. But to bring it back to you as the audience and to our speakers, very, very welcome to all of you who are youth activists, human rights activists, and peace builders yourself. Every day, youth are fighting for change, for peace, and for a future that is a lot less of the same. And we are today going to turn to young peace builders in Afghanistan, Colombia, and in Kenya to find renewed inspiration to continue that fight. And first on the list, our guests are Abrar Kakar from Afghanistan, Hafsa Ahmed from Kenya, and Diego Garzon from a project in Colombia, but based in Gothenburg. And we turn to the Kenyan context, where Hafsa has been working as a peace builder and human rights activist for years now. One of her recent achievements and contributions were speaking to the United Nations Security Council, specifically on the youth peace and security agenda, and on the African Union flagship project, Silencing the Guns in Africa by 2020. Kenya has a large and diverse civil society, Civicus, that is tracking the status of civil society sectors globally, are however saying that the civil society sector is obstructed in Kenya. There's been great milestones achieved recently with an amendment to the Constitution in 2010 regarding the rights to freedom of expression, rights to the freedom of association, peaceful assembly. But what we can see in practice is that this, even though with this amendment, the situation is very dubious and reality is quite not what the government is informing us it to be. Welcome, Hafsa. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story and what is at stake in Kenya?
Well, hello everyone. Thank you, Emily, for giving me this opportunity. My name is Hafsa Ahmed, born and raised in Eastleigh, Nairobi. I think what made me a peace builder, initially, I was practicing accounting and I was working for a private, company. What transpired in 2014 in this community has propelled me to be a peace builder by default. At that time, I didn't choose to be a peace builder. The situation dictated. There was a lot of, the government, there was a lot of terrorist bombings. Just give me a moment, please.
And we know there can always be some trouble with the sounds. Already in our pre-meeting that we were having before this conversation, there were troubles with internet blackouts and earthquakes and all kinds of things. So I'm hoping that our guests that are listening in will have a little bit of patience when it comes to the internet connection and the sound quality. Thank you, Hafsa.
Yeah, thank you. So as I was saying, there was a lot of terrorist, bombing and grenade attacks in Eastleigh, because Eastleigh is an area inhabited by Somalis. And so it was easier, it was easier for terrorists to hide amongst the Somali population in Eastleigh and prepare and plan their attacks in this community. And the government felt that was a huge threat, and a lot of people who are suspected to be the terrorists were coming in as refugees. And so the government decided, to flush out the refugees from the area. And they came up with an operation called Usalama Watch. Usalama in Swahili means security watch. And in that working from home challenges, in that, operation, a lot of atrocities were done. A lot of people were, taken from their homes and taken to a concentration camp, regardless of if you were a Kenyan, if you had a proper documentations or not. So long as you were Somali, you were subjected to that brutality. And I was living amongst that community. And I felt very uncomfortable. I remember confronting police officers and telling them this is wrong and whatever. And the only answer they gave me was, young girl, go back home, or we will beat you. And so what I felt, powerless, but I really wanted to contribute and tell the world whatever is happening in our community. And so the only thing that I felt, the only weapon that I had at that time was a smartphone. And Facebook was a huge platform people were using to communicate in 2014. And so I decided I will take photos of these police officers, these police officers, breaking the law, wearing uniform. And I started taking those pictures and sharing it on Facebook. And it wasn't an easy thing. It was scary. I risked my life, but it was worth it because I felt the world needs to hear and see whatever is happening in our community. And slowly by slowly, my friends, other youth from the area joined, and they started taking photos from different angles, from different areas, and it became a small movement. And we started sharing stories. Media were interested to, understand what's happening and follow up. And there was a huge presence of media in our community after, sharing a lot of those not so good pictures. After a month or after 2 months, the project, the operation was halted because of a lot of, noise from activists on the ground, from the media, and from the larger civil society. And that was such a huge success for us. We did our little thing, but it contributed to, preventing from this operation continuing. And from then, I immediately decided this is the thing that I have to do. I will never be a bystander again. I decided to, after the operation, the police left our areas. There was suspicion and, the rift. There was a huge rift between Somalis and non-Somalis. The non-Somalis accusing Somalis of harboring the terrorists. Yet Somalis suffering from the terrorist attacks and police brutality. And so there was a lot of pain and, suspicion and mistrust. And I felt very uncomfortable. I hated that someone will see me as my ethnicity first and my religion, and not the person that I am. So I decided to, bring the youth. I felt the youth were the perpetrators of this, were spreading this hate and all. So I was like, what can I do in this community that can bring this youth together? And so I started hosting a talent search show where youth from various backgrounds, ethnicities, religion will come together and showcase their talents. We will enjoy music, arts, plays, and that, brought together community members who will never initially meet or talk to each other. And as I continued doing that project in my community with the support of friends and, with the networks that I built in this community, asking a friend for a hall, for a social hall, and, seeking help from friends and family, our local administrator and the local, elected leaders noticed my effort. And so when Sophia from LPI came to our area and she was searching for influencers or youth who are actively engaging in community, the local administrator recommended me. And that's how I got to know of LPI and work with them for the last 2 years as a moderator of a sustained dialogue in my community, where each year we trained 140 youth in peace building. And I felt like literally what I was doing initially was, I didn't understand this is called peace building. My only urge was to bring, unity and people not to judge each other. But through this process, I'm so happy that I got to meet a lot of youth and we built relationships. And each day is a progress. It's not one day thing, but we still continue engaging and, involving youth in advocacy and community engagements so that we still build this. It's very fragile. Whenever something happens, that bond can be easily, broken. Whenever a terrorist attack happens in Isli, you could literally see the reactions within minutes. People immediately realize this is a Muslim, this is a Christian. So this is a process we need to continually do, and that's what we do. We continue day by day hosting events and bringing the community together. And as Emily mentioned, I think LPI provided me with the opportunity to share the work that I do in my community and brief the mighty UN Security Council. And I'm very grateful that I was able to share with the UN Security Council the atrocities that happened in my community. And I feel I've done justice to, whatever in my capacity so that this issue will be addressed.
And I know the situation when it comes to information in Kenya is probably very different to what we know here, as many of us are tuning in from Sweden, where media is basically controlled by the government, but also there's a very negative and stereotypical image of both refugees, immigrants, and also young people coming after the elections in 2014 and 2017, where you were gathering young people to film the atrocities. most of the reports afterwards have been focusing on the religious groups that were helping to put together dialogues between communities. But in fact, what we hear from you is that also youth organizations and young people have gathered to create their own dialogues. And looking now at the corona situation that's also hitting the whole Africa region, really about to hit Africa region really hard. Young people are at the forefront. And you are yourself putting together a team to get facts out there instead of propaganda. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, thank you. As a peace builder in my community, when COVID-19, commenced, or the pandemic was with us, I decided to engage fellow youth on the ground and on how we can, disseminate information, because the government messaging was in English. And a lot of people, local communities, do not understand or speak the language, like Somalis, the community that I come from. And so I talked with my fellow friends, and we came up with an app or a WhatsApp and Facebook, bot that was developed in line with the WHO guidelines. And we literally, with the permission of WHO, we translated all those information into Somali, and we shared with our communities in Kenya and in Somalia, in Mogadishu. And in that bot, besides, translating the WHO information, we have addressed a lot of myths, cultural beliefs. And, a lot of people were saying, this is not for Africans, this is not for Muslims, this is punishment to punish others. So there's a notion, unbelievable notion, perception around COVID-19. And so we felt we need to address that. And in that board, we developed 3 weeks ago, and so far we have over 4,000 users accessing and asking information. And for those who cannot read or write, we have done a voice note where they can speak in Somali and send voice, and we immediately reply with a voice so that they can listen. And I think in that small effort of ours, it's addressing a lot of, myths and cultural beliefs and religious beliefs, and also making them understand how they can prevent the spread of coronavirus. If they contact, what procedures can they follow? What are the preventive measures? And we also go in this community that I live in, we go to markets and to streets to talk to communities one-on-one, to sensitize them, and to provide, water tanks for hand washing and soap, so that they understand how this thing is dangerous, how contagious it is. A lot of Somalis were calling it hargab, which means common cold. They didn't understand how dangerous this thing is. And so we put a lot of effort so that the community can understand. And I'm very happy when friends and people share with me and tell me, the application that you developed, my auntie, I sent a voice note of addressing, my auntie was, talking about a lot of myths, and I countered with sending an audio from your app. And my auntie was conflicted. She was like seeking more. She wanted to understand more. So I really feel encouraged when I hear such stories that even the older generation who cannot read, who hold a lot of cultural beliefs and all that, are heeding to what this application is informing them.
Wow, it's really impressive. What about you? Like your personal motivation? Like how come you said enough is enough? Tell us a little bit about your background growing up in East Leigh, and your personal ambition with like taking and pushing these projects forward. What motivates you?
Well, what they say, when you hit the bottom rock, there's nowhere else but going up. The challenges in my community is what motivates me. When you're surrounded by challenges, when I share my personal story, I'm very privileged that both my parents are in my life. I never lacked anything. I went to school, in fact, to a private school. I was fortunate enough in my early teens that I was able to start a business and run it. And so I'm very privileged. I was very comfortable, living my life until I experienced the Usalama Watch, until I came face to face with injustice and oppression. And that instantly took away fear. Whatever comes my way, I believe I have to and I must, engage or do something about it. And that motivates me every day. Whenever an issue comes up, literally, I'm the first person running so that I can, attend to that issue. When we were for the last 2 weeks, we were doing an advocacy in my community because we felt we were neglected. There was no, information disseminated on the ground. There was, minimal government help on the ground. Notwithstanding, Isli, as we speak now, is under cessation of movement. It's only in Isli, Nairobi, and Mombasa. Those are the two only areas that were put under cessation of movement, because the population is huge and it has a lot of malls, and the people who are coming in and out of this area was huge. And so they felt they need to lock it down so that people do not come to shop and all that, so that they limit the spread of the virus. But again, you can't, you can't put people under cessation of movement and you provide nothing. Food prices is unimaginable. The prices has hiked, and there's no water. Few people are able to access water because of boreholes, and so you can imagine all the challenges. And I came up with a policy, advocacy plan, and we engaged the local elected leaders, the government representatives on the ground, and they felt very uncomfortable. They felt I am shaming them or I am inciting because our election is 2 years away. So I've been getting threats from my WhatsApp number, and but I believe those are just a mere, idle youth who are sent to scare me away. My vision for this community is bigger than, anyone trying to prevent me from what I'm doing. And so even on my Twitter, I was literally directly engaging our elected member of parliament, and registering my dissatisfaction with how he's running, or how he neglected the electorates that have elected them. And every day is a new challenge comes up, but I think we need to push. There's no backing off.
I think you're putting it really well, and I personally, and I think a lot of people listening are really hearing you as well when you talk about your own privilege, but also the realization that when you realize that something must be done, you must do something. And you're definitely a source of inspiration to me, Hafsa. So we will just quickly move on to Abrar Kakar in Afghanistan as well. And Abrar Kakar, you're a program manager at Art Lords, involved in a project called Let's Talk Afghanistan. Mentioning a little bit about the situation in Afghanistan, we know that civicus that are monitoring civic space globally are calling the space restricted. We know that journalists are under threat. There's continued impunity for crimes against human rights activists and journalists, and the war has been continuous since the 70s. There are, though, some shining light in terms of the murder of 2 journalists last year being actually prosecuted. We have a new political deal between the government and opposition in terms of managing the peace now since May. But of course here it's a problematic area where for civil society, for youth, for women, and for working on human rights. Abrar, can you tell us a little bit about the context and why you have specifically decided to take action?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Abrar Kakar. I'm a program manager at Art Lords. Art Lords, we are the good lords, not like you hear about Afghanistan, the drug lords or the war lords. We created Art Floats back in 2014. Our first campaign that we started in Afghanistan was against corruption. We painted a mural in Kabul city where it had two eyes and it was accompanied with a text. And the text said that I see you. That was our campaign, I see you. It was against corrupt politicians and the corruption that was ongoing in Afghanistan. And since then, we have painted murals all over Afghanistan. And since then, we have painted murals all over Afghanistan that have covered different topics such as human rights, justice, peace, security, youth inclusion in the peace process, the current peace negotiations that are ongoing between the Afghan government and the Taliban. And we started painting murals about other issues as well. The reason that we started painting murals in Afghanistan was that the politicians and the government entities and other private businesses started occupying our space. By our space, we mean that the pedestrian lanes that we used to walk, the lanes that we used to go to school, to go to work, or ride our bikes on. They put these big seawalls, or they like to call it anti-blast walls, that cordon off their premises. I'll show you just a sample of them, that how do they look, but they are quite big. These are two samples of the wall. So they stack them side by side, and then they cordon off the area. You can see it. I hope you can see it. And they started taking our space, the place that we used to walk around. And the Kabul city, it became like a prison for us. We could not work, we could not enjoy our life. So we thought, why not use these walls as our canvases for painting murals? We started painting murals on the canvases. And through our murals, we tried to convey our messages of peace, of hope, and challenges that the Afghan society faced as a whole. In 2016, we painted a mural that shamed the politicians who were in an armored vehicle. For example, we told them that, what are you carrying in your vehicle? Why you're not stopping for the checkpoint? Why do you have illegal guns in your vehicle? So that was something that was welcomed by the people a lot, because that was their concern. That was what people wanted to see in the community, to have a discussion. And through art, we use this soft power of art to create a discussion among our community and start a dialogue, so that people refer back to their core challenges and how they can come together and solve these problems. In terms of working with youth, we have been engaged with youth since we have established our organization. Two of our most successful programs in Afghanistan, one of them was back in 2017. We invited youth from 12 South Asian countries to Kabul, Afghanistan, to talk about peace, talk about art, talk about culture, and how regional cooperation can better, regional cooperation of youth can better pave the way in the future for an inclusive peace in which the youth are part of that. In 2019, we started another program called Let's Talk Afghanistan in 7 provinces, where we gathered the youth from the communities that were impacted by the war in the provinces, either side, by the government side or by the Taliban side or by the ISIS. We asked them, what are your desires? What are your hopes for a peaceful Afghanistan? What do you want not to be compromised in the peace talks with the Taliban and with the youth government? And since then, we are engaged with youth activists and artists who are working in their communities actively to raise their voices and their concerns for a peaceful Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. Do you think you could tell us a little bit more about why you've chosen to do these murals, and how far can you go in your criticism about certain politicians, about the government, because as we know, the civil society is so restricted. So what are the, how do you actually start the conversation through the murals?
As our first mural, when we painted that back in 2014 to raise the concerns of the people, we saw that the people welcomed it, because the majority of the Afghan population, they are illiterate. They cannot read. So we wanted to deliver to them something that they could understand. And that was through our artistic activities, through murals. And in terms of criticizing the government, that has been our one of our goals. But apart from that, we wanted to create a discussion on online, create a discussion among the community that, okay, these things are ongoing, think about it critically. These are the issues that you and I as a community face, and we have to talk about this, find common solutions, feasible solutions for this. If you don't talk about it, if you don't raise our concerns, how will the corrupt politicians or the government employees or other people who are corrupt, how will they understand that there are people who are actually raising their voices? In terms of the space, yes, the space has been small for the civic activities in Afghanistan. But one of the things that Outburst has been doing is that they are very active in the ground. They are taking the art to the people in an intrusive way. And that has created a big impact. Or when we painted the mural against the armored vehicles, almost I say that almost all black Land Cruisers went out of Kabul. There were no black Land Cruisers, and that was very hopeful for us. We could see that it has an impact, and people used to talk about these things. And the space was closed, but the only thing that we could use as a non-intrusive way was our art.
And we saw some examples of the art in the beginning of the slideshow that was playing before we started this conversation as well. Maybe we'll also have it in the end of this conversation, so those who want to see them can stay tuned or go into your website. But could you talk a little bit about the criticism about the corruption? Like what are people saying, seeing your murals, starting these talks about Afghanistan? What is the future? What are people saying?
In terms of the future, we want to take the art floors into also our digital platforms as well. We want to create an online discussion as well. We are posting our videos, photos of our mural paintings in our digital platforms so that it reaches more people who are not seeing our murals on the walls. They talk about these issues. And in terms of criticism, we want to criticize the government so that they pay attention to these things. For example, the corruption. The government has been very active since 2014 in terms of reform, but not as much as the people want. The people are complaining daily about the corruption. There are police who are taking money from the poor. There are injustices in the justice sector, and a lot of corruption that is ongoing in Afghanistan. And apart from that, there are other issues for them, the peace, the human rights violations, and the closing space for the activists and the artists who cannot raise their voices. So that in terms of the future, we see this as a big impact, and we want to reach all the corners of Afghanistan, some parts of Afghanistan, and especially the rural areas. We do not have access to it because of the security challenges. We want to take this nationally and internationally to work with different countries that we have in the past 2019, take it internationally as well, and create a national and international dialogue among youth and come together for an inclusive peace process.
Thank you so much. And also, just to remind you, if you have a question either to Hafsa or to Abrar or also Diego that will speak soon, just type them in the chat, and then Susanna will take a few of your questions in the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Abrar. Diego, I don't know if you're in Gothenburg or if you're in Colombia, but you're representing an organization called Multicultural Sweden, also having a sister organization in Colombia, Multicultural Colombia, where you've been mostly active. And what can be said about Colombia is that last year it was recorded as the country with most killings of human rights activists. Before the spread of Corona, a lot of experts were also assuming that Colombia this year would actually be, in fact, the world's largest context for refugees, with an influx of refugees increasing with 8,000% in the last few years from Venezuela into Colombia. But Colombia also has a huge population of internally displaced persons, refugees within its country. and a lot of them are also themselves activists. And I specifically, I've been working and studying myself in Colombia, and I'm very impressed with how culture and music and general like social meetings, community meetings are such a big part, not only for the peace process, but Colombian culture. And I know especially the indigenous communities have been working a lot with their own cultural expressions, land rights, and I visited the Cauca region in 2015, and the Nasa population, which is a indigenous group. And just last year, their leader, Cristina Bautista, was actually murdered. So that was a very personal turn for me, being just an engager and an observer of the conflict, now living in Sweden. But I know that Cristina Bautista then, in a famous speech, said, "If we stay quiet, they kill us. If we speak, they kill us. So we speak." In your organization, you have chosen to work with ending the circle of violence, specifically with activities targeting young people and cultural activities such as hip hop, football, and so on. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and why it matters?
My name is Diego Garzón. I live in Sweden now. I'm in Gothenburg. I'm a teacher. I've been working with Multicultural for the last 6 years, and I'm one of I create Multicultural Colombia, and then I started a project in Sweden for 6 years ago, together with another friends. This program was like, we decided to start this program because we wanted to work with child soldiers and with refugees from the Colombia within the country. So we started a project in Usme, in Bogota, with 20 kids. They were transporting drugs for gangs in Usme. So we decided to talk to the community and see where the problem was. What's the problem in Bogota? So the kids were recruited by these gangs on their way home. So we decided to start to begin with a football school. We had 20 kids at the beginning, and now we have more than 200 kids. But the whole program was created by the community. We tried to do something that the community likes, and the kids were wanted to do. So we started with this football school. Then we started with a project in Medellin, and that's with internal refugees from other parts of the country, especially from the Chocó area. It's in the south, because they came to Medellin as an internal refugees, and they were illegal. Illegal in their own country. So we decided to work together with a team of lawyers and then help them to legalize the new neighborhood. We have been working with them for 6 years, and now the neighborhood is legal in Colombia for these refugees. And we created a cultural project, and that it was created by the community as well. So it was a hip hop school. And now when you name NASA, we are working with them in Bogota, in Bologna. So we have been working with them for the last 6 months, and now we are going to do a pre-project together with Forum Seed. With money from Forum Seed, with the NASA indigenous people that they are living in Bogota. I decided to start this project because it was really difficult to see child recruitment. That was and it's a huge problem because in Colombia, or in the rest of the world, child soldiers are seen as the kids who have weapons. But a child soldier is a kid who is transporting drugs. A child soldier is the one who is smoking. The child soldier is, the whole concept of child soldier is really big. So my concern was to begin some project that could end that. And that was, for me, was really, really, really important to end that thing. Like, let the people know that child soldiers are not just the kids who are wearing the weapons. I mean, who are child kids is a much brighter concept, you know. The interest of Multicultural was to end that. As you named as well, these human rights activists in Colombia are, I mean, have been killing everywhere and every day. And that's a problem for us in Multicultural as well. We have some kind of, I don't know, lucky because the community like us. So we have never have some problem with that. But we know a lot of people in Medellin have been killed because of, they talk about corruption, and they talk about what is happening in the neighborhood, how the police brutality, everything. So Colombia is a really difficult country, you know, the context of it's a really polarized country. So it is difficult to work as a peace builder. Even if you are Swedish or whatever, you can get killed as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What personally motivates you, and what is your driving force, or your other volunteers? What are their driving forces to continue this work, even though there's a security risk, even though there is a threat to one's life?
I mean, I just think that it's so unfair, and the kids' voice is like never heard, and they are the ones who suffer more in this conflict. So that's why I think that that drives me to continue with this. The other ones that are working with Multicultural have seen this develop of the people. You know, we have these child soldiers, and now are graduating as a psychologists, as a socionom, I mean everything. So the development and the development of the neighborhood. So I don't know. I mean, everything drives you in this kind of project. When you talk about the peace building, it's like it's just so good to work and to see how people engage in these projects, and to see how they really want to work with their projects and be their own protagonists, you know. That's the thing that drives me.
We'll soon bring in some questions from the audience as well, but first a question to all of you, and I think you could start, Diego, perhaps. What do you think peace is, and what does it mean to be specifically a young peace builder? Is that different from other type of peace building?
Peace means equality. I think that's the concept of peace. Also, by my honest, equality, you know, access to everything. And as a young activist, I think that the problem is that when you're young, you are not, I mean, at least in Colombia, you are not taking that seriously, you know. The people doesn't believe in you. You are an entrepreneur, and because of the country is so polarized, so you are like being a communist or a guerrillero and things like that. So that's the problem in Colombia, that you are somehow some kind of terrorist because you are defending human rights, or you want to build peace in Colombia, no? That's the problem there.
Abrar, what do you think peace is, and are there particular challenges to you as a young peace builder?
Well, in the Afghan context, it depends who you ask about what peace means to you. You will get different answers, obviously. But for me, I don't know how would peace look like, because we grew up in this conflict. We don't know what does peace mean to us. Does it mean that it is the end of the war? Does it mean we will have our freedom? Does it mean going to school? Does it mean having a right to vote? So these are the questions that we have our peace, what actually it means to us. And because we grew up in this conflict, we don't know what it would mean to us. But for us right now, it means that it is the end of the war, and it is the end of the conflict. In terms of challenging to work with youth activists and artists around Afghanistan for peace, it's the security challenges that we face. Work with youth and to work with the people that who are impacted firsthand in rural areas because of the insurgencies, because of the conflict. So these are the challenges that we face on a daily basis.
Thank you. And I think you're tying it in really well to the Sustainable Development Goal that we are discussing right now, number 16, peaceful and inclusive societies, that it is hard to completely separate peace from the building of institutions and fair and just institutions, or from democratic participation and voting rights, for example. Hafsa, what do you think peace is, and what does it mean to be a young peace builder to you?
Well, thank you, Emily. To me, peace means, being, feeling safe, being at peace with yourself, your past experiences, and your perception of the world. A lot of people, inflict pain on others because of their experiences. And in trauma healing, they say trauma not healed is transferred. All the injustices, all the issues we're facing in this world starts with someone who is not at peace with himself from within. So I think it's a personal thing for me. You have to be at peace with yourself, with your experiences, with your life, so that you can contribute and you can, refrain yourself from engaging in violence and harming others. And as a young peace builder, it's challenging in my context. The culture that I come from do not approve girls to speak in front of men or in front of people. I am literally now an outcast. Thank God, not for my family, but for the larger community, because they feel, I am going against the grain. Besides, those cultural and issues, there's the notion in our community or in our government that youth are naive, not knowledgeable enough to engage with authority or, politicians or government. And I believe that notion has to be dealt away with so that youth can be engaged in a meaningful way. So yes, I face a lot of challenges, being a Somali girl, engaging men, they feel very, offended. And that's something I'm very cognizant with whenever I'm engaging men, regardless of their ethnicity, and also government, because I'm a young person and they believe I'm just being creative and noisy and not, articulating issues in my community. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm almost getting tears in my eyes because it's just the strength of the things that you talk about, Hafsa. And I think you're tying into the very complicated layer of Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is that the UN has highlighted that to create an actual peaceful, inclusive society, you need to have a culture of peace. But what does that mean? And also what I think you're tying into the difficulties in changing these kind of attitudes and behaviors that you need to actually have a culture of peace. I will bring in Susanna. Do you think you could pick one or two questions from the audience that we could ask our panel?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Emily. And thank you all for your excellent questions. It has been tough to select a few, but I will do my best. Okay, let's see. There was one question that kind of could be asked to all of you. And that was, how do you see that international organizations or diaspora communities should support you, your efforts or other efforts on the ground? So what is the most effective support or cooperation in your views? That was for all of you. And then there were also some questions for each and every one of you. So I think if that sounds okay with you, Emily, I will just pick one for each speaker, and we'll hope that time slows itself for a little bit. So this one is for Hafsa from Love Wojnakowski at the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation. And Love wants to know, are there any municipal and or national channels or structures in Nairobi or Kenya that's available for you or other peace builders so that you can increase the impact of your work? So that was for Hafsa. And then we had a question for Abrar, which was on digital platforms. So there was a question on which digital platforms work well for communication among activists and artists and youth in Afghanistan, if these are more local, regional, or is it, more the big and global sort of platforms? And last but not least, a question for Diego. In your project or in your story, you shared about, I believe there is a link with youth between Colombia and Sweden. And so a question would be, do you see a sort of need in Sweden for more sort of peace building sort of work and activities through the work that you've been doing? So those are some of the questions. I hope they're clear and I can repeat them if needed.
We can start with Abrar. International organizations, how should they support you, and which platforms work for you as an artist?
Mm-hmm. So we have been working with international partners and international organizations since our outlaw started, with the EU, the USIP, and the State Department of the United States. We have been working with them to raise awareness about the peace and the needs. That's why we, as a youth organization or as an organization, want to work towards peace. Support can, as they have supported us, they can just listen to our stories and see a different side of Afghanistan. When you hear the name of Afghanistan in the media or on the internet anywhere, it's all about the war, about the atrocities that is happening in the country. But we want them to hear our story, to know that there's a different side to Afghanistan. There are artists, there are youth, there are activists who are actually working in the ground for peace. And I think that's the only support I could think of they could give, to listen to our stories, like this platform, that this opportunity that you give us to listen to our stories.
Thank you so much. And Hafsa, how can international organizations support you, and what municipal structures exist already today for you to increase your impact?
Great. I think what we need as young people is, mentorship, our capacity being built on the areas that we engage. So I welcome capacity building and also financial support, because it's not easy to work in this community without financial support. We have been, having the support of friends and family, and sometimes it gets, it gets uncomfortable because they cannot really support a project because people are struggling in these communities. And when you bother them with asking financial support because you're doing a peace building, peace building to them is just a casual thing. They don't understand how paramount and how beneficial it is for this community. So yeah, I believe getting the right, financial support partners and our capacity being built will, intensify our efforts in the community.
Thank you. And Diego, can you expand a little bit on your collaboration with Sweden and what it's have been meaning to you?
We have been working with a hip hop school here, and we have been working with, we have an English school in Colombia. And so we have sending letters from Swedish students to Colombian students. And I think that it helps a lot Swedish kids to know how the reality for other kids are, to expand their mind and see how the situation is in other countries. I do believe that we have to work a lot here in Sweden with peace building. There is a lot of stigmatization here. I think that there is some neighborhoods here in Sweden where the people is really isolated or really stigmatized. But I mean, you have Biskopsgården in Gothenburg and other neighborhoods in Stockholm that kids are not that welcome everywhere. So we have to work a lot with inclusion and peace work. And that we have to let them talk, you know. I don't think that it's easy for them to be there and to be stigmatized about their neighborhood.
Thank you so much. And I know we have prepped a little poll for you guys as the audience. So I'm asking Feben to prepare that. And we also started a few minutes late. So I think we'll end this conversation about 10:04 for those that have to run exactly 10 o'clock. But after the poll, I will also ask our panelists to just do a 1 minute like summary or key message that you would like to send to our audience today after this conversation. Do you, as the panel, want to do a little summary already now then? Can we start with Abrar, perhaps? A key message that you have to our audience, or a message in general to the decade of action now as we're getting closer to the Agenda 2030 to reaching its end? Is it likely that we will achieve the Sustainable Development Goal number 16, inclusive and peaceful societies? Abrar, are you with us?
Thank you. I think I left the question unanswered. In terms of digital platforms, we use Facebook and Instagram and Twitter mostly for our publicity and disseminating our messages. And in terms of communicating with artists and activists, we use WhatsApp mostly because it's a bit secure in Afghanistan. So these are the global platforms that we use. We don't have any specific regional or national platform that we would use.
Oh, thank you, Abrar. So my question to you is if you have a key message to the audience as a last summarizing point.
A key message to the audience is that whenever you hear about Afghanistan, you hear about us as well, about artists, about authors, about activists, about the youth who are actively working with communities, the impacted communities by the volunteering. That's the message. That's the message that we want to give to the audience, that Afghanistan is not a place of war or atrocities anymore. It's a place that where youth are working, where they're struggling to have a peaceful society. Yes, there were wars, there were the negative things aside to Afghanistan, but right now, me and other hundreds and thousands of other youth hope that in the next few years, in 2030 or 35, we have a peaceful Afghanistan where everybody could visit us and see a different side of it.
Thank you. Diego, what is your key message? What should we do? What should we feel? Can the Sustainable Development Goals be achieved in 10 years?
I do believe that we have to empower kids. Our generation has this kind of individuality thoughts, but the kids are more conscious about the planet. You see Greta Thunberg and you see a lot of young activists. So if we just keep empower kids, if we just keep working with them, I think that we are going to reach these goals. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible. So just keep empower communities and just keep empower kids.
Thank you. Hafsa?
Well, thank you. My message to everyone would be, peace building is not an event. It's a process. And it needs a lot of concerted effort and continuity. So I'll add everyone to not tire, from engaging in peace and, initiating dialogues in their communities or wherever in the world that requires, peace building. And I want to thank Life and Peace Institute for bringing sustained dialogue in my community. It has had a huge impact to be part of. And so, let's not tire. Let's use our available resources to continue building peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The Youth Peace and Security Agenda is also having its 5-year anniversary this year. and the Security Council at the UN, and the General Secretary has delivered its report on its implementation. So my hope is that we can continue to put light not only on your stories that have been a huge inspiration through just this last hour, but also all the work that youth organizations have been doing and continue to doing during normalcy, during wartime, and during this pandemic era as well. Let's see if Matilda can bring us the poll, and this will be the concluding part of this seminar. A big thank you to everyone who's participated from home. A big thank you to the panels who've been exceptional, and to our hosts at LSU, the Council of Swedish Youth Organizations, the Life and Peace Institute, and FUF, the Association for Development Issues. I have been your host. I'm Emily Baski, the first Vice President at LSU.